Hi, my name is Julius Horsthuis. I'm a fractal artist and visual effects artist based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And I wanted to do a little talk about fractals for visual effects. So this one's specifically catered to the VFX pipeline. And I want to explore a couple of things. Mainly the question, is Mandelbulb 3D a usable tool inside a visual effects pipeline? So if you're in VFX, if you work in VFX, or if you're interested in VFX, or maybe if you're a producer or a director, and you think about, well, I really like the look of some of these fractals, and you may have seen lots of work out there, and would there be any kind of way to harness this power and to get that inside the traditional pipeline? Then this talk is for you, because this is I get a lot of questions from the VFX industry, and I'm just going to sum up these questions, and I'm going to answer them here, and hopefully, and this is obviously what I'm aiming towards, is that the answer to the question, is it possible to use a Mandelbulb inside a pipeline? Hopefully you will agree with me that the answer is yes. First, a little bit about me. My name is Julius Horsthuis. I have worked in visual effects industry for about 8 years, and before that I worked for 5 years in motion picture film and TV drama on sets, etc. Also, I work for 5 years now for company Hectic Electric, which is based in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, on the lovely canals. Which is a post facility, really great. We do lots of feature films and lots of TV commercials, mainly Dutch feature films, but we're also doing some stuff in the USA, in America. And Hectic Electric is really good with stuff like real flow and effects, and also has a great fur pipeline. So especially for the Netherlands, I think we do almost all the fur stuff. I've done a feature film which I supervised about 2 years ago called To Be King, or Koning van Katoren, which had like 850 effects shots, and it was crazy and it was real fun. It had lots of completely CGI buildings that were moving, and it had a CG dragon, or some kind of monster rather, lots of green screen, lots of matte painting. It was real fun and great project to work on. I'm saying this because I want to let you know a little bit on the type of environment that I'm in, because I realized that lots of fractal enthusiasts are maybe coming from a little bit more the programmer side of things, and I really want to hammer home that this is going to be about typical VFX pipeline stuff. Can we use fractals in that? So how this is going to work is here's the questions that I get sometimes, and the short answer to every question is actually no. No, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. But there's always a way around that. And so first I'm going to give the short answer, and then we'll explore the way around it. And one of the questions I get asked most often, is, can I import or export camera data? And indeed, the answer is no. You can't import or export camera data at all. There's no such function. There is no way to do that. That's the short answer. But then, obviously, there is a way to export camera data. The way to export camera data would be to render out your scene, and then just to track it in Buju or Cintize or PF Track or whatever camera tracking software you use. Because this just completely works, and it's very usable, and a really great way to export your camera motion. But you would have to make your camera motion inside the software Mandelbulb 3D, and then by rendering it and tracking it, you can export it. So this works. It works well. And importing is really not possible. You can't really import an FBX or anything like that. And I don't see any way you could actually even maybe by hand, like typing in the numbers frame by frame. Mandelbulb is not very well with having a keyframe on each frame. So something like that, hacking it would be out of the question. Also, you would have to adjust your rotation, position, and scale of your camera path to something which makes sense in the software Mandelbulb. In order to do that, you might have to visualize the camera path as a spline or something, and then go to another view and rotate and scale. None of that is possible in Mandelbulb, so forget about importing camera data in Mandelbulb. But there is another very, it's not really a way to import it, but it is in a way, and that is just by eyeballing it. If I maybe have an animatic or something with a camera motion, with a slight truck in, and the lens is a 45 millimeter, then I can just look up what the field of view would have to be. I can type in the field of view very exactly in Mandelbulb, and I can do camera motion, which is a slight truck in over 72 frames or whatever it is. And like that, I can recreate the camera motion that we would want to have. And then obviously nothing's going to match if we have if we filmed an actor or something. That's not going to match. But then there are ways to actually then start tracking that camera from Mandelbulb, importing it in Nuke, reprojecting, and do whatever's necessary. But so the best result is basically had when the camera motion originates in Mandelbulb, and then is exported, and it's exported through the system of Cintize, PFTrack, Buju. Works perfect. Next question would be: can I import or export OBJ or mesh data? Again, the short answer is no. Unfortunately, again, there is no import-export in OBJ. And if we think about it a little bit, then we can actually come to the conclusion that this makes perfect sense, because they aren't meshes. These fractals, they are infinitely complex, and obviously at render time there is a cutoff threshold, and there is a point where it says, okay, stop iterating anymore, and now you start rendering a dot on the screen. But this is going to make it very hard to triangulate it and to export it. So the only way to export mesh data is something called voxel stacking. Basically, what you do is in 3D you define a voxel or a volume, which is usually just a cube. So and then it starts rendering slices through that volume as PNGs or JPEGs, a little bit like an MRI scan would handle a three-dimensional volumetrics. And what you get is a image sequence of black and white stuff. Black is basically where there's empty space, and white is where it would have detected a fractal. And then I can take that voxel stack and I can run it through something called this is Fiji, this is Fiji, or Fiji, or something like that. And that will compile it into a OBJ. So in that way, you can actually export a piece of your fractal. Be advised, it's only a very small portion of the fractal, and it can export it into an OBJ. And that OBJ will be very, 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 very big. Be like, if it's 1,000 by 1,000 by 1,000 voxels, I think it can be well over a gigabyte. And it can take a very long time to compile it in that Fiji program, and then you need a lot of cleanup. You need to go into ZBrush, and you need to You have a lot of extra layers as well, because some fractals, they're like an onion, so you only see the outside, but actually inside isn't just solid, it's lots of tiny layers, and obviously the software has no way of knowing that you're only interested in the outer layer, so it will also take all those inside layers, and this can be very very high res. So this is not at all an option that I recommend unless for very specific stuff. Another way of doing it is looking at it more like a height field terrain. So actually, if you're looking at a fractal more like a mountainscape, for instance, and again, be advised, these are not fractals that like you find them in Vue or TerraGen or something. They're also called fractal, usually making these mountainscapes, but they're like, I don't know exactly how it works, but they're like random noise functions with fractal properties. But they are not the same as these type of fractals, as these proper fractals. So for these proper fractals, what you could do is you could, from top down, if you have something that it resembles a landscape, and it can't have any overhang, as is always the case with height field terrains. You could, from top down, you could voxel slice the terrain, and you could do that really high res. It can be like 4K by 4K by 4K, because it's a volume. And then take that. And then a colleague of mine works at Hectic Electric called Julius Horsthuis. He wrote a Nuke script that does exactly this. It takes these voxels and it stacks them on top of each other, and it creates a 32-bit EXR height field terrain, which is basically only one 4K by 4K bitmap. And if you then take that into Maya or 3ds Max as a displacement, you really have a lot of detail. But you can't have any overhang, but it's great for making fractal terrains. So this is another way of exporting mesh data. There's one other way, and that is similar to exporting camera data, as I said before. If we look at a nice part of the fractal that we like, and we render it with a moving camera, we have some parallax, we have a lot of parallax, we can easily render like 100 frames or something that we rotate around it for, let's say 90 degrees. We render that, and then we take those stills and we feed them into software called PhotoScan by Egisoft. So PhotoScan will then first, it will. I think how it works, it's actually the same stuff, but it works much better than 123D Catch by Autodesk. It will actually first like track the camera a little bit, or find similarities, and it will build a mesh from those different views. It's actually it's made for photos, so you can actually also photograph your house or a mountain or anything from different angles, and it will make a mesh, construct a mesh from that. It will do the same thing with a fractal, and this will get a very high res mesh, which is great for then putting other stuff on and using in your pipeline. But it's not high res enough that you can relight it and completely get rid of the texture, and it will still look like the typical PhotoScan and 123D Catch mesh, but very high resolution. So this is another way to export it. Importing is not possible at all. I did have the suggestion from someone someone said to me how cool it would be if you could import an OBJ and then grow fractals on that structure. So if you could import like a really rough layout of a terrain maybe, or of a building with walls and ceilings and not much else, and then it could just grow fractals on that. That would be totally awesome. That would be really amazing if that was the case. Unfortunately, nothing near that is possible. So Another question I often get is, can I render elements or channels like normals, reflections, Z-buffer, etc.? You can render Z-buffer. It's actually I do it all the time. It works just like in other software. The only thing is it's only 8-bit, but it can still be very good for stuff like in compositing. You can do clipping. You can do like fog in the distance. And you can do depth of field, which works great also with 8-bit. So that's really perfect. I use Frischluft, and you can do some great depth of field stuff. So there are lots of good ways to use the Z-buffer. That's really one of the things that I started like looking more seriously at Mandelbulb when I found out that it would do that. It's like, okay, I can actually use this. I can actually go in now and start compositing with this because of that Z-buffer. So that's a very helpful one, and that's the only yes you'll get, because the other things, normals, no, reflections, no. But again, there are ways to get normals and reflections because it has reflections. It just won't have a separate channel for reflections. But if you render one pass with reflections, you're just a beauty render, and you render the same render after that again without reflections, so you are rendering double, so it's just a lot of waste. But it's then I could, in my compositing software, I could do a difference between those two passes, and I would get it just a reflections pass. So in that way you could get a reflections channel. And same with normals. There is actually Mandelbulb has a way of it does know the normal inside the frame buffer. There's just no way to export it, but you can take a bitmap and have it look at the normals. Have the UVs of the bitmap conform to the normals, or something like that. I haven't completely explored it, but I can imagine if you take a bitmap which is just a red, blue, green, yellow for color gradient or something like that, you would have to work out exactly what it is you'd need to do. But I'm sure you could figure it out, and you feed that in as a bitmap while killing all the ambient occlusion and all the lighting and all the shadows, etc., and like having it as a self-illuminated material, as it would be called in Max, and you'd have it conform to the normals. Then you should get a usable normal pass. But I think it's difficult to set up, and it's usually not really necessary to have a normals pass. But I can imagine there could be a use for that. So how can fractals be incorporated in a pipeline? I've gone I've gone over a couple of things, but I've also said there is a lot of restrictions here. It's going to be hard to say, you come into a studio and it's okay. Can we use this? Can we make the mountainscape for this alien landscape on it? And I say, well, we can't import the camera, we can't export the camera, we can't really get some geometry to match with it. So there's going to be a lot of problems that we have to overcome. Indeed, there are. And some part of the solution could be, I'm not saying it necessarily will be because it depends on a lot of other factors, but it could be that you change your pipeline a little bit. You just say, okay, we love these fractals, we love this look, we want to go with that, but we have to start a little, just to change a little bit the way we think about how this stuff usually goes. Because usually, you have concept art, and then maybe goes to the matte painters, and everything works together. And maybe with this kind of stuff, you would have to change that a little bit, which is not the end of the world. And I'd like to maybe give one idea of looking at it, just one way of seeing that it hurts less, or it can be more fun to do it. And this is which I call fractal recce, or fractal location scouting. One when we are writing a script for film, and then at one point some location scout is going to look for the locations, and he's never going to find exactly what's in the script. He will probably find completely new things, or he's going to say, oh, hey, this location would be great, and then the producer or the director might say, well, that location looks great, but it doesn't work for this scene, but hey, it could work for this scene. So these kind of things, they change all the time, and a location obviously will never be known at the moment the script is written. So the location is a big variable, and it's often, you can't really change much about a location, or at least this is how it used to be for the last 50 or 100 years. Obviously now we are changing in visual effects, we're changing a lot about the location. But imagine that we weren't, then we'd be at a location and we'd be, let's say, at a mountain. We used mountains before. We have a mountain, we have a lake, and then we start looking, well, where can we put the camera? Which angle can we look? Where's the sun? Everybody's cool with the fact that we can change the location of the sun, that we can change the shape of the mountain, we can change where the lake is, but we can change where the camera is and which way we're looking. So this is what obviously cinematographers do all the time. They're in a location and they need to, with what they have, they need to make the best possible picture. Well, imagine doing the same thing with fractals. Imagine that even though we have all this power to change the fractal, we don't have some power. We cannot exactly define, can we close this more, but keep this shape over here. I like this shape over here, but we need something here. We can't always necessarily do this, but we're completely free on where we put the camera, also where we put the sun in this case. So we have more freedom in a way than a traditional location scout has. So, Fractal Location Scout. We go inside the fractal with, we go inside the right fractal. We want to have this particular kind of place. So with that mindset, we go in the right, this kind of thing, and then we start looking until we have a beautiful shot that we think that could work for our film, or maybe not a shot, but a motion that we can work with. And then we can actually, inside Mandelbulb, we can render these bits. We can take that bit and voxel slice it, do something else with it. So thinking about fractals in that way can, I think, immensely help, and this can help creativity, because you're obviously you can be very creative on a very narrow scale. There's a lot of stuff you can't do, but because there's a lot of stuff you can do, you have to be very creative with the stuff that you can do. And it's actually surprising how much stuff you can do using these fractals. And I just think that there must be some really cool CG short or film, or maybe title sequence or something like really big and not necessarily high budget, but high profile, that can just blow people away with these fractals. And these are just some ways that I have thought about, and that we have thought about at Hectic Electric, that can actually make this from something that you could do if only you had the software, to something that you can actually say, we can actually do this. I'm Julius Horsthuis. I'm a visual effects supervisor and a fractal artist for Hectic Electric in Amsterdam, and I thank you very much for listening. Bye.